like a Hellcat.
Welcome back into our breaking news coverage on an extraordinary night in NBA league history. As you know by now, tonight's playoff games were postponed by a boycott, beginning with the Milwaukee Bucks' decision to walk out on their Game 5 closeout chance against the Orlando Magic earlier today. Other teams followed suit, and so we wound up with no games tonight from the bubble in Orlando. Instead, a players' meeting that began about 8 Eastern time and lasted just shy of 3 hours is now apparently over, according to multiple reports. And it got contentious with Shams Charania tweeting that the L.A. Lakers and L.A. Clippers voted to boycott the remainder of the season. No news or no idea what that means exactly. Chris Haynes reporting the same, that they were ready to walk away from the rest of the playoffs and were the first two teams to exit the meeting. Meanwhile, every other team voted to continue playing. Fallout from this is uncertain at this point. LeBron James apparently said he wanted ownership to be more involved, take more action on social justice issues, and according to at least one of the reports I read, I think more than one, walked out of the meeting a little early. 3D, I don't know what to make of this in terms of what it means for the duration of the season. Is it majority rule? That's the way Players Association things typically work. This doesn't sound like necessarily an official Players Association kind of vote. So I don't know where we stand in terms of the season ahead.
No, I agree with you, Matt. We don't know where we stand at yet, but what I do like is that we are flushing out these emotions that these players are going through right now, right in the heat of the moment, as we say. So with that being said, I know we're having a conversation before we come on air that some players knew that if they wanted to leave the bubble because they felt uncomfortable either with the pandemic situation or with the social injustice, you may leave the bubble. Now, with that being said, Matt, now if all sources are true that the Lakers and the Clippers want to leave, now all parties really need to sit back down at the table here again, either I guess first thing in the morning or later on tonight, to figure out which players still want to leave and how does that look and how does that flush itself out, that players really feel the way they feel. And I'm sure Adam Silver and Michelle will have a conversation along with Chris Paul, along with everyone else, saying, do we give these players that wish? And what does that look like? What players still want to stay? So as these conversations still go on, Matt, I'm just happy the guys are willing to put it all on the line now and flush it out now so we can get to the next phase.
And we expect to have Shams Charania on a little later on to help flesh out some of the details of this meeting, because at this point, I can't honestly say if the season is going to continue or not based on the information that we have. We hope, we don't know, we hope to hear from either Chris Paul as the president of the Players Association or somebody else associated with the Players Association to summarize what was discussed and give the rest of us an idea of what is happening. I think there's a general expectation that tomorrow's games will be at minimum postponed, and then we'll see where we are on Friday. But again, at this point, we don't really know. Stephanie Reddy has been covering this extraordinary day from the bubble in Orlando, and Stephanie is with us now from the Disney Resort. Stephanie, for folks who are maybe a little late to this story, who weren't around at 4 this afternoon when this thing first started brewing with the Bucks making the decision not to come out and not to play today, can you kind of take us through the progression of what has happened today as you understand it?
Absolutely, Matt. It unfolded very quickly. It was very fluid. I was to be working the middle game of the day, the 6:30 tip, which was going to be Houston and Oklahoma City. So I got to the building before 3:30 in the afternoon. Obviously, the first game, the Milwaukee-Orlando game, was supposed to tip right around 4. So as I'm in the building, I am seeing and hearing what everyone at home was seeing and hearing, because I was in a different facility, that the Orlando Magic was on the court, but the Milwaukee Bucks had not come out yet for their warm-ups. So, of course, now everyone's antenna goes up. Now, I am watching Oklahoma City players warm up with assistant coaches on my floor. In the other arena, I'm also seeing Houston Rockets assistant coaches on the bench waiting for players to come out so they can help them warm up. Then all of a sudden, it was about 4:15 when I looked at the clock when they were all still warming up, At 4:34, an assistant coach from the Thunder goes out to the court, calls the players in. They all leave the court. Houston Rockets assistant coaches go to the back. 4:39, we showed Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul, who, as you may have already mentioned, is the president of the NBPA for the Players Association. They were in a meeting together for about 10 minutes. We showed them leaving that meeting at 4:39, and then by 4:50, players were leaving the building. They were getting on their buses. The Houston Rockets bus was not there yet, so there was a bit of a delay for those players to leave, but eventually both teams did leave the building. And this was all before we heard any official word. I'm standing there in real time reporting what I'm seeing, and we had not been told officially yet that the game had been postponed. So as you can imagine, it was a bit frantic for us in the arena. Now you fast forward to tonight, and the players are supposed to be meeting starting at 8 p.m. this evening. That meeting is over, and I'm not sure if you can see behind me if there are still players walking across this bridge here, but the meeting is definitely over. My sources have told me that there were coaches in that meeting in the beginning part. The coaches were then asked to leave. It was not only head coaches, some assistant coaches were also in there, and I'm sure you've seen the reports about the teams that voted to play, teams that voted against playing, and as you stated so well, Matt Weiner, that means there's some ambiguity on what will happen with this season. Will we be proceeding? Now, I did talk to another source who told me just moments ago they were prepared to play tomorrow, and I mean Thursday, but that they have been told there will be no games on Thursday. So we will see what happens after Thursday. But that is what I have been told, that there will be no games on Thursday.
Well, it's interesting, Stephanie, that timeline really amplifies that the players did not have a unified front on this, at least as of this afternoon, evidenced by the fact that the Magic were on the floor ready to play. And you mentioned the other teams for the 6:30 game were ready to play as well. It was the Bucks that started this. We had heard reports that both the Celtics and the Raptors had met together, in fact, to talk about potentially boycotting their second round series. But it was obvious that the Magic weren't in on the loop. And it amplifies the point that this is not a monolithic group. There are a variety of opinions on this. What are you hearing in terms of the perspectives of players about the merits of pushing forward versus saying, you know what, we need to make a really huge statement here and walk away and end the season, something that's never happened in league history before?
Right. Well, Matt, just to circle back to your point that you were making about how every team wasn't necessarily on the same page, it does not necessarily mean that they weren't in agreement or united in their sentiment. It just means that it happened so quickly, they weren't able to spread the information quickly enough. I had some sources tell me that the Milwaukee Bucks literally decided just before they went out that they decided they were not going to play. That's how quickly it evolved, and that is why the Magic were already out there. I was told that one player for the Milwaukee Bucks texted a player for the Orlando Magic, and that is kind of how the information got filtered out. Now, it is true, the reporting that has been out there, I also confirmed that the presidents of both teams had been in communication. But again, this is not an organizational decision. This was a player decision. So while both organizations have come out after the fact in support of their players, this was a decision that the Milwaukee Bucks and the Orlando Magic players made to boycott this game. And the specific reason was because of the shooting in Wisconsin. Now, to circle back to your question, Matt, there has been a lot of sentiments. I mean, as you mentioned, this is not a monolithic group. This is hundreds of players, and they all have different stakes in this game. You can talk simply about the competition and not even talk about anything going on outside this bubble. And obviously, they're here to win a championship. They're also here to use their platform. That was part of the deal, if you will, coming to the bubble, because they knew it would be an extended, amplified platform so they can use their voices to try to affect change. So I think the players see the value in both. I think they see the value in doing what they did today, boycotting, stopping play, because as you know, it's been newsworthy. It wasn't just the NBA. The WNBA decided that they were not going to play their 3 games. Major League Soccer had 5 games postponed. Major League Baseball had 3 games postponed. And also, when you take a look at tennis, Naomi Osaka, she said she will not be playing tomorrow. She will also be boycotting in her semifinal match. So this has turned into quite a movement led by the NBA. No surprise, they've always been on the forefront of this. Matt, we just don't know what the end result will be.
Stephanie, I have a question for you. We know George Hill has really been outspoken. We used the phrase platform, and this has been a great platform for him and Sterling Brown. Was he one of those guys for the Bucks that led the charge early in the locker room that made this spontaneous, leadership as far as not playing tonight? Have you heard that?
I have not heard that specifically. And I will say this, Dennis, I think part of the story here is that the reason why there is a lot of ambiguity and a lot of uncertainty is because the players are really genuinely trying to present a united front. Even with the people that I've been in communication with, they've been very specific in not being specific, if you know what I mean. They're not saying names. They're saying we, a lot of united fronts, we stand together, those sorts of statements, which I can respect and appreciate. So I cannot answer that question specifically, but we do know, as you said, George Hill has been very vocal even before this happened.
Stephanie, it's a lot to keep track of down there. We appreciate your efforts throughout the day to stay on top of it for us, and we will talk to you soon. Stephanie Reddy with us from the bubble in Orlando, where things are very much up in the air right now, 3D. Tweet from Adrian Wojnarowski a few moments ago about the Laker and Clipper votes. He writes that it was, quote, considered more of a polling than a final vote. The resumption of the playoffs still remains up in the air. That addresses the question we had off the top. What does that mean? The Clippers and Lakers voted not to continue. The question for me, and there are hundreds of different perspectives on the issue. Players, by and large, want to call attention to social injustice. They want to do the right thing. They want to encourage folks back in their communities to affect change in some meaningful way. I think everyone's pretty much in agreement on that. How best to do it is obviously a different matter, and whether there would be more impact by a day like today where games are boycotted and the NBA is at the top of the poll earlier today, walking away after his Game 5 was postponed. The Players Association president playing a big role in an extraordinary and unprecedented situation. We'll speak with Shams Charania next.
Like a Hellcat.